Weirding Way Media.
Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, where we look back at television shows and pop culture from the 1980s from a modern, feminist perspective. We hope you are looking at a fabulous summer of love and respect. And here are your hosts, Sharon+johnson and Susan+lambert+hatem.
Hello, I'm Sharon.
And I'm Susan. You know, we've been very lucky to be nominated for several awards by now. We've been nominated like 11 times. It's actually really great, obviously, for a lot of reasons. And I'm really grateful to all of our listeners who have voted for us and when there's been a voting component. So thank you very much for that. And sometimes we've lost and sometimes we've won. But it always brings us something cool and not just trophies and certificates.
Frankly, the best is the opportunity to meet other podcasters. We met via email a wonderful podcaster, Suzanne Rico, when we were both nominated for the Emmys, an award given by the Podcast Academy, which we are members of. We met by email, congratulating each other, sharing our interest and admiration for each other's podcasts. And by the way, her podcast is really great. It's called The Man Who Calculated Death.
And she's listening to our podcast and she's like, oh my God, I love the 80s. And just as I'm about to go, hey, maybe you want to come on the show, Suzanne was like, oh, and Jon Cryer is our executive producer. So what comes out of my mouth is, hey, does Jon Cryer want to be on the show?
As well it should. So cut to the Emmys, and Susan and I are walking down this gigantic hotel convention complex, trying to figure out where we're supposed to go, and completely lost when we start following these two people. And I assume the beautiful lady with Jon Cryer is Suzanne, but I got to be brave. And so I say, hey, are you Suzanne? She's like, no, I'm Lisa Joyner, and this is my husband, Jon Cryer. Now, I knew that Jon Cryer was married to Lisa Joyner, who used to be on Entertainment Tonight or one of those shows, but I completely spaced. In any event, we're like, hey, we're the 80s TV Ladies, and we're nominated too, and they congratulated us.
So we're sitting in the audience for the Emmys with Jon Cryer. Well, actually, Jon Cryer and their team were at a fancy table because, you know, he's presenting as well, and he's Jon Cryer, and there's other bigwigs there like Ira Glass and Ronan Farrow, you know. But we go on, we're very excited, and then we lose in our category. But it turns out The Man Who Calculated Death also loses in their category. I mean, we were robbed, I tell you.
Actually, Susan, we were up against some very good podcasts, and we were actually very happy and delighted to be nominated.
Well, yes, okay, that's true. But we did get to commiserate with John and Lisa about losing, which was fun. And you know, I mean, this guy has 2 Emmys, I'm thinking, but he's also lost some awards too. So he knows what it all feels like. And we're like, where's Suzanne? And they're like, oh, she's over with those folks. She knows all these people. And so she's over in the big crowd with Ira Glass. So Sharon and I are just like, well, let's go find dinner.
Actually, I did have a chance to quickly say hello to Suzanne before she took off to go find the other people she needed to talk to. But unfortunately, Susan, I think, was talking to Lisa and John when I was doing that. And then Suzanne left.
What? Wait. You got, because I was like, I never met Suzanne. That's not fair. You got to meet Suzanne. I didn't even know that.
You were talking to John and Lisa, I think.
I was mesmerized.
Yes, rightly so. Rightly so. Anyway, we're trying to find a place for dinner and find a place to eat. The one we went to was crowded, but the one poor waitress is like, find a table and I'll get to you. And we find kind of one of the last two tops. And right behind us is John and his wife, Lisa.
So, of course, we left them alone. We didn't go interrupt their dinner because we're not that crazy, but it was funny. And then again, I thought it was funnier still that even after all of that, we never met Suzanne, but apparently you met Suzanne. So forget about it.
Either way, the events of the evening all led to Jon Cryer saying yes to coming on 80s TV Ladies.
And you meeting Suzanne and me not.
Well, yes, I did meet Suzanne, which you will have the pleasure of doing very soon, I'm sure.
Okay. Thank you. Anyway, for most of our audience, Jon Cryer should need no introduction at all. If you were alive in the 80s, or if you are a television fan, then you know that Jon Cryer is probably most famous for the 1986 romantic comedy Pretty in Pink, also starring Molly Ringwald and Andrew McCarthy, directed by Howard Deutsch, written and produced by John Hughes.
Jon is an actor across film, TV, and stage. He won 2 Emmys for playing Alan Harper in the 12-season hit comedy 2.5 Men, first as Best Supporting Actor and then as Best Actor. And then went on to get rave reviews for his performance as Lex Luthor on the CW's Supergirl.
And he's done many television shows and pilots and movies. He is also the executive producer for several podcasts, including The Man Who Calculated Death and a podcast called Lawyers, Guns, and Money, which he also narrates. And he has written an engaging and a little bit revealing autobiography, So That Happened.
So let's make this happen. Welcome to 80s TV Ladies, Mr. Jon Cryer. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're absolutely delighted to have you come in and talk with us today.
My pleasure. Such a pleasure to be here. I waved at you. You won't be able to see that in a podcast, but I'm waving at everybody at this moment.
And they appreciate that. We can kind of feel the wave.
Oh, good.
I think,
See, that's nice.
That's the great thing about audio is you can feel things that are happening as often as you can hear them.
We started talking about your parents and their work in the business and how you're basically...
That you're Hollywood royalty. You come second generation.
Royalty. That's really just aristocracy, not royalty. No. Let's please.
Part of the entertainment aristocracy. So why don't you tell our audience a little bit about what both of them have done and maybe how you got started.
Or I could be a Nepo baby. There's ways that can go 2 ways. My parents were both actors. My father's a guy named David Cryer, who's an actor, did a few films, was on an episode of Wonder Woman, which to this day is like probably the proudest moment of my young life. Was like, my dad's on Wonder Woman. My mom is an actress and a playwright and a composer, Gretchen Cryer, probably most famous for a show called I'm Getting My Act Together and Taking On the Road, which was a big off-Broadway show and then ran all over the world. Huge in Japan and Germany, which kind of surprised me. I was like, oh, all the Axis countries. Let's
okay.
Italy, Austria. Let's see how it goes.
North Korea?
Yes, exactly. But I grew up in show business and fell in love with it very young, mostly just because if you've ever been backstage at a show, there's this wonderful energy that's around, and performers are nuts and idiots and brilliant, and they just sort of let it all hang out. And I always loved sort of being in that atmosphere and being around writers and just people making things. So I loved growing up in it. And by the time I was 13 or 14, I knew that I was going to pursue it.
But it sounds a little bit like you had a fairly normal childhood.
You read my book.
I did. I read your book.
It wasn't that normal.
I mean, but, it was not, you weren't traveling the world, following, No.
I grew up in New York City, went to public schools. There were little odd things every now and then, my parents were divorced when I was 4. But again, there was always stuff just happening in the apartment. At one point, years later, I remember my mom had a play reading in her apartment. So I come home from school, I open the door, and there's Al Pacino sitting in my living room. I was like, oh, hi. And he was just doing a reading, because New York actors just like to help and try to be a part of things and set things up. And so you do readings all the time to sort of help playwright friends, and it's a great community thing. But he was already hugely famous by this point. So it was very odd to see him in my living room. He was very nice. We didn't get to talk much.
Was he taller or shorter than you imagined him to be?
Shorter.
They
he's not
almost always are.
Yes, almost always. Morgan Freeman, taller. He was on Electric Company, which was a television show that I loved at the time. It was a children's show.
Love Electric Company.
So when he came over, he was, the easy reader from Electric Company, but he had just done the movie with Christopher Reeve that made him sort of explode as an actor. What was that? Oh, I forgot what the name of it was.
And
it was the first thing that sort of made him. Oh, you're looking it up now.
No, I'm not. I'm thinking. I'm actually thinking.
Somebody should be looking it up. Shouldn't we have somebody here looking it up?
It is 9 times out of 10 that I'm looking things up.
Okay.
But I was trying to be in the moment.
Sailor's got it.
Yes.
Sailor's on it.
Yes, thank you, Sailor. At any rate, my mom and dad never made a lot of money at the thing. My mom's biggest hit was Getting My Act Together, and that took us out of, we had hit some serious monetary rough straits before that. But thankfully, we were in a rent-controlled apartment in New York City. They still had rent control, and that allowed us to stay in the home that we were comfortable in. And my dad, after the divorce, moved to California and tried to make his way as a film actor. So he did a few films besides the Wonder Woman appearance that was so important to me. He also,
besides the best one.
Yes, exactly. The most important one. He was also in American Gigolo, and he was in Escape from Alcatraz. He actually hosed down Clint Eastwood in his cell. He was a vicious guard who was like, the warden don't like when people have fights on the yard.
Did that make you proud too?
Yes, it did. But interestingly, I didn't see American Gigolo then because I was actually underage. It was an R-rated movie. Richard Gere was naked in it, and thus I was forbidden from seeing it at the time. So I had only seen that recently, actually, which was crazy. The craziest thing was that my dad's still alive, and I got to text my dad and his wife about the fact that Trump was going to reopen Alcatraz because he saw the movie over the weekend. Because literally it showed in Palm Beach, and so all of a sudden he's like, "Well, hey, we're reopening Alcatraz."
I had an idea.
Yeah.
Well, I love living like that.
I know. Yes, it's those kind of little surprises keep life interesting.
Yeah. At least that one may not kill us all.
Exactly.
So there's that.
There's some upsides to that one.
Street Smart was the name of that movie.
Thank you. Street Smart. Yes, him and Christopher Reeve in a dramatic role. And yes, and he was the bad guy in Street Smart, Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
By the way, we're back on Morgan Freeman.
We're back on Morgan Freeman. We jump around a lot.
We jump around a bit. And that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. But yeah, he had broken out in Street Smart, and I don't remember why. I think it was just a party that he was at. But again, I loved that as a kid. I loved being in the theater and meeting these performers. And I loved the theater. I was a sucker for musical theater. The most ridiculous of it was the stuff that I loved. And so, I pretty much, as I said, by the time I was 14, I knew I wanted to be an actor.
At that point, did you know if you wanted to do theater versus television or film, or were you just kind of open to all of it at that point?
I actually loved movies. I was one of the kids who waited online for an hour for Star Wars and Close Encounters and a lot of the science fiction stuff at the time I really loved. So I wanted to act in movies and direct them. That was the goal. But I also loved sitcoms. Loved sitcoms. And I grew up in, some would say the golden age. There was the 50s.
Some who have a podcast about 70s and 80s television
might just say. But, the Mary Tyler Moore Show, MASH, All in the Family, all those were concurrent at the same time was pretty amazing. And I loved growing up in that time. Good Times and Jeffersons and just so many great shows. Cheers, Taxi, holy crap, So all of it was good for me. But I figured I'd have to start in the theater. That was just where everybody did it. Everybody started. I grew up in New York City, so I'm there. And interestingly, my very first job was in Brighton Beach Memoirs. I was an understudy for Matthew Broderick. Then I got fired.
That story in the book is great.
Well, thank you.
I thoroughly enjoyed your book.
Thank you. I'm so glad. It was fun to write. I didn't know what I was going to write about, because the publisher approached me right after Charlie Sheen had his meltdown on 2.5 Men. I think that's what they wanted most, was what's the behind the scenes on that. But I said, you guys, my career has been full of surreal stuff, not too dissimilar from that. So, how about I just do all of the surreal stuff, and I think you'll enjoy it. And so that's how the book came to be. It ended up being a really fun exercise. I'm really glad I did it. Just to
it did
have
sort
a
of
record of
walk you back through and take a look back. Was it like nostalgic to do it, or was it like what did you discover writing it?
Well, you discover that you remember time wrong. There's so many things that I would say, oh, that happened in second grade. And it's like, nope. That was like 3 years later. Or, and you go, oh, well, yeah, like I remember watching the moon landing on TV, and my mom was like, nope, it did not occur. And so there's stuff like that. You realize how flawed your memory is, that over the years, stories get altered a little bit. The context changes a little bit. Sometimes you realize that there was a funnier ending. So, so you work the story a little bit toward the funnier ending. That was a big thing. But it was really wonderful to reach out to friends and get stories from friends and get their input on it and get my mom's side of a lot of these things that I had never asked her, hey, do you remember this? That was really fun. I had a fun experience. I talk about the summer camp I went to, which was a theater camp in upstate New York called Stage Door Manor. It was an amazing place. There's been a few movies about it. There was a movie called Camp that was literally shot at that summer camp, and it's wonderful. One of Anna Kendrick's first roles. And then there's this more recent theater camp, which really nails the whole vibe. But I went there, and one of my roommates was gay. And so in the book, I stated that he was gay. And the publisher said, you need to contact him and make sure that he's still gay. To make sure that I'm not defaming him or something, and I was like, okay, that's going to be an awkward phone call. So I was like, hey, Dave, how's it going? Hey, are you still gay? And he said, wait, let me ask my husband. So yes, David is still gay. But that kind of stuff, it was fun to reconnect with everybody and see what I remembered wrong, and sort of realize a lot of the things I went through and just sort of put them in context. Mm-hmm. It's like, oh yeah, this was my story, I guess.
And what did you think when you were done? Were you like, this is the story I thought I was going to have, or?
Yes, I did feel like I accomplished what I wanted to, which was to communicate how surreal it is to be. I mean, I hope you got that from reading it. Yes, that it is a surreal business. It's a business that you go, okay, it was never predictable. It was always a little bit bizarre. And like the opening story is me doing a film with Robert Altman, who's this revered director of Nashville. But our film was a teen comedy. And the first scene we were shooting was a scene where my family is this kind of rich family. We're having a wedding and we come out of the chapel and these birds are supposed to poop on us. The bird, we're supposed to release a flock of doves and they're supposed to poop on us. But of course, the doves, once released, didn't actually do that. They're not trained to do this. There's no way to train pigeons to do such a thing. So they had to fake the poop. Now, this involves all kinds of technicalities. This is pre-CGI. So this is 1983, 84.
Yeah, okay.
So it's basically this very harried special effects guy over on one side with this poo gun that he would shoot the poo so as to rain down upon us. But Bob Altman, stopped it because he's really a stickler. And he said, wait, the trajectory of the poop is completely wrong because the guy was shooting it from the side. And you can just see, there's no way this is, how are the birds doing this?
Doves.
So he said, okay, it's got to come from the top. And so the special effects guy is busily making up some more fake bird poop. And Bob Altman decides, okay, he sends a guy up onto a ladder to throw the poop at us. We do that, and the scene is yet again a flop. And Bob is like, what? This is not working. And so he decides, I've got to do this myself. And so Bob Altman, director of Nashville and MASH, Academy Award winning, Gosford Park, Shortcuts,
one of the most revered American
directors working, is just sitting on top of a ladder, flinging bird poop onto me and Jane Curtin and Paul Dooley and Ray Walston and Cynthia Nixon, a very young Cynthia Nixon. And I was like, and this is my first day. This is my first day of being in the movie business. I was like, okay, this is gonna be a wild ride, and it was. It absolutely was.
Well, and I love the moment in the book when you describe that you were all jockeying to basically get the right amount of bird poop on it. You wanted it to work.
We're
and
actors.
you
We want the shot
actors.
to work. And I realized I'm looking around at, there's Cynthia Nixon and Jane Curtin and Paul Dooley. But because we know that Bob has a limited amount of bird poop to dump on us, we've got to sort of act like catchers in the outfield. Like we've got to sort of jockey to get into the right position to get pooped on in filmic fashion. That also says a lot about the real position of actors in this
I was going to say, that's
you're
acting
jockeying
right there.
to get pooped on by Robert Altman.
Oh my God. Okay, so
sorry
that's
guys,
fantastic.
you didn't know this conversation was going to go there. I'm sorry. Hey, you can't handle the truth.
All right. So before we go further into the early films, which I do want to go to.
Okay.
You also talk about in the book. I'm really going to keep bringing the book back because you said some things I want to come back to, which is you talked about watching The Facts of Life, and you mentioned The Facts of Life in your book several times. We have literally just finished a series looking at The Facts of Life of episodes. So I would like to know your thoughts on The Facts of Life growing up.
Well, you take the good, you take the bad, you take them both, and there you have The Facts of Life. I love The Facts of Life growing up. Me and my male friends used to watch it ironically, but of course we secretly enjoyed it. The crazy thing was Molly Ringwald, young Molly Ringwald, was on it for the first two seasons. First season, yes. She didn't quite have a developed comedic persona just yet, but you could already tell she had this wonderful soulfulness to her. But yeah, we loved it, and we would have much fun with the drama of Blair and Tootie and and Joe and all that. But it was funny because I saw you guys recently had Saad Khalada.
Yes, we did.
Who's a prince, by the way. Lovely
So
man.
You've worked with him.
Yes, he directed a couple episodes of 2.5 Men, actually. But it was funny because at I don't know, 14 years old, me and my friends would watch that show, and my friend Eric loved that the director was a guy named Saad Khalada, because he was like, this Middle Eastern guy has got to deal with these crazy American teenagers, and he would do his impression of Tootie, when you come in here, you say, "Oh, Blair, what is this?" And then I met Saad Khalada, and that's him. That is 100% him. Working with Assad was so lovely, and he was an old theater guy, so he really he's just funny. He just he gets what's funny, and that's really what all you need as a director. If the writing is there, just don't get in the way of it.
Yeah.
So but that was a real full circle moment for me to work with this guy who, for years, we used to talk about on. He also used to do WKRP, which was another show that I loved at the time, So, his name was all over. I mean, we cared about those things for some reason. Like, we cared about Jim Burrows, and we cared, and I don't know why. And like Jane Curtin, she had a show. What was the show that she had that she and
Kate Nally?
Kate Nally. Thank you so much. That used to shoot in New York. That was one of the few sitcoms that actually shot in New York City. And I remember going to a taping of that show as a kid. So we were, again, a TV show was exotic for us. So going to do something like that was like a fun, weird thing to see. Ooh, yeah, exactly. But it wasn't like. But again, in retrospect, we were very keyed into the behind the scenes aspects of sitcoms for some reason. I don't know why.
Well, Sharon and I talk about that because we both, have sort of different. We met in the 80s, and then we, have talked about pop culture pretty much since then. That's all we talk about. But we have different experiences because when I was growing up, there were names that would pop out. I really wasn't paying that much attention, but Asad Khalada is one of the names that popped out. Eugenie Ross Lemming, who was the co-creator of Scarecrow and Mrs. King. Thank you, Sharon. And it was those like, oh, wait. And usually it was unusual names or women's names.
Yes.
For me.
Juanita Bartlett.
Juanita Bartlett. That was the one that I never got to meet. But yeah.
But you noticed it because most of the names were Bruce Geller, you know, most of them were guys.
Yeah.
And the business was very white guy centric for a long time. That's all the more remarkable are the female writers. But the crazy thing was like the female writers, you go back to like Lucy, you know, I mean, it's not like this was an unheard of thing. It's just that it's just that, you know, men were used to running the room, I guess, you know.
Yeah.
Which is, you know, it's not cool. And all the more remarkable that Asad Khalada, you know, can break through that and be a part of that, you know, when it's you know, it's not culturally who he is, but he gets it. He gets it all. Yeah. You know, it's you know.
He's got a fascinating story.
I'm sure.
He started as a pop star in Egypt.
Oh my God. Okay.
He was like a boy band. He really was.
Oh, that's fantastic.
They were like the first boy band in Egypt because they heard this music and they were like, we want to do that. And that sort of, and then ultimately he was like, oh, I like performing and I like putting things together. And he ended up at Yale Drama School. So there you go.
Which helps.
Which does help.
Which is a nice thing.
All right. So back to you.
Yes, back to me.
Back to you.
Oh, and another Facts of Life thing. Just got to work with Kim Fields as a director. Have you had her on the show?
No, we want her on the show.
You got to have her on the show. She's
maybe
awesome.
You can put in a good word for us.
Oh, okay. I'll see what I can do. I am not the agent of Kim Fields. I have no power over the.
It's okay.
Woman.
We won't hold you accountable.
But that was a thrill as well, because I had a daughter working, obviously living single, and so many other things. And I had met her like if she was on a talk show. Sometimes I'd be like the next guest on the talk show, and I'd be like, "Oh, hey, Kim Fields! Oh my God!" And then she'd walk away, and I'm like, So when they were talking about her directing an episode of Extended Family, which is the most recent sitcom I did for NBC, I was like, yeah, I'm all in. And she was great. Absolute, a lot of all directors have different styles, obviously. Like Asad has this wonderful gift for making everybody feel incredibly comfortable. And he just, you just know that there is not going to be a crisis. That he can take care of all of this stuff. Yeah. And Kim was just incredibly specific with timing, specific with gags, specific with, and it was great. I loved it. Cause that kind of specificity is just a gift. You just, if you've already got somebody who with her comic chops, who knows how the joke's going to work, that's it makes it a lot easier.
Wow. Yeah, Assad had a lot of really nice things to say about Kim and her moving into directing and how well she's doing as well.
Yeah, so. she's gonna do great. All the directors have different styles, and actors can come at it two different ways. They can say, I've got to find this, I've got to, let me work on this organically. It's like, no. We don't need that. Cause we're doing a show here. And I was really grateful for her economy, and grateful for her experience.
That is so cool. All right. So you've worked with the Facts of Life ladies. Fine. All right, so let's go back to the movies.
Okay. By all means.
We're back in the 80s.
We have to take a break, but we'll be right back with more Jon Cryer.
Check out this introduction to The Man Who Calculated Death by Suzanne Rico. You can find it at themanwhocalculateddeath.com or your favorite podcast player.
I just want you to come home, Mom.
This is a story that begins with a dying wish.
One thing I would like you to do.
My mother's last request that my sister and I finish writing the memoir she'd started about her German childhood, when her city burned and her father designed a secret super weapon for Adolf Hitler.
Deutschland, Sieg Heil!
My grandfather, a man named Robert Lusser, headed the Nazi project to build the world's first cruise missile, which terrorized millions, ripped his family apart, and left a legacy that dogged my mother like a curse.
I think Mom often felt like she suffered, that's what she deserved. Because her dad was a Nazi scientist. And see what happened to the family?
My mom always seemed to be haunted by a question that was shrouded in time. Who bombed a remote farmhouse at the end of the war and killed her mother? And why?
She had some secrets. Mom had some secrets. She did.
All we have to go on is the Dusty family legend that the attack was British revenge for my grandfather's flying bomb.
My experience, even with secret projects, is nothing stays secret forever.
The odyssey to finish the twisted story our mom ran out of time to tell takes us deep inside our own ancestry, to the dark intersection where family history and world history collide.
It was something even a nightmare cannot repeat.
I'm Suzanne Rico. Join my sister and me as we search for the truth behind our grandfather's work, solve the mystery of our grandmother's death, and for the first time, face the ghosts of our past.
Jeez, who is he?
Listen to The Man Who Calculated Death. Available now wherever you get your podcasts.
And welcome back. Let's get right back into it. You do No Small Affair with Demi Moore.
Yes.
And how was that experience?
That experience was interesting. I had done the Bob Altman movie. That was technically my first movie, but I was a small supporting role, and it was a fun experience. But Bob shoots movies in a different way than all movies are shot. Bob, basically, you have a sort of an outline of the way a scene is going to play. You've read it, you have a script, but that's just the merest outline. He wants you to improv it, basically. So he mics up everybody in a scene, all of the characters, and keeps a wide shot with a couple of roving shots getting singles, and you just improv it a bunch of times. And he'll show all of the dailies to the whole cast the next day, because they take a day to get developed. And everybody just sits and laughs and doesn't laugh, or he'll have some box wine, which always makes the proceedings fun. And
that makes everybody laugh.
Yes, exactly. And this is not how movies are made at all. The No Small Affair was a movie I did with Jerry Schatzberg directing. He was a very soft-spoken man who had directed Panic in Needle Park, some very sort of gritty 70s movies. And he was very thoughtful, had excellent choice of hats, and the director of photography was a guy named Vilmos Zsigmond, who is an Academy Award-winning, brilliant cinematographer, and I worshipped him because he did Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which was one of my all-time favorite movies. And so for me, it was, okay, I'm in the real business now. Bob Altman was fun. That was a weird party, but now I'm in the real business. And the funny thing about that movie, I was just remembering that. I wonder if I was auditioning for two movies at once. I was auditioning for No Small Affair, which had been going it was supposed to shoot a year before with Matthew Broderick and Sally Field, and I think Martin Ritt directing.
Oh, okay.
But then I think Martin Ritt got ill, and so they delayed it, and then Matthew Broderick fell out of it, and then the movie just sort of hung there, and they said, okay, you got to recast. So they were casting No Small Affair and Mask, the Cher movie with
yes.
And so Peter Bogdanovich was directing that. And I remember meeting with the director on No Small Affair, and then going to meet with Peter Bogdanovich. And they offered me the part in No Small Affair like that night. On Mask, they said, oh, no, you still got to meet and work with Cher. We've got to see if that's going to work. And I didn't have any time to to take one or the other. So I chose No Small Affair. Peter Bogdanovich was not pleased, and I had, Peter Bogdanovich is a master. Even like What's Up, Doc, which is like a movie of his that people say, oh, it's just a screwball comedy. It's an amazingly precise, stunning piece of work.
Genius.
I love that movie.
Genius.
I'm so glad.
Yeah,
yes,
absolutely.
Okay, then we're
bag,
we're all of one
yes.
tribe here. But at any rate, so I found out later because I actually got sick halfway through No Small Affair, and they had to shut down production for a week. And I heard Peter Bogdanovich thought that was hilarious. I was like, oh, Peter Bogdanovich. Wow. But at any rate.
Because he was mad you wouldn't do
He was mad that I didn't
movie.
do Mask. But Eric Stoltz is amazing in that movie. Eric Stoltz is wonderful in that movie. There's, and I honestly, I don't think I was 100% right for that part anyway. I mean, again, Stoltz is amazing in that movie. So I have no regrets. But for me, that was my first sort of starring role. So I again, the Bob Altman movie was such a bizarre, non-usual thing that like I still had to learn things on the set. Like I had to learn hitting marks precisely. Like the hardest, like if there was this one shot I recall where I had to walk down this long hallway, but then hit a very precise mark at the end. But I'm also not allowed to look down and see it. So they give me little foot things, but every time I got up to it, I would trip over the little foot thing every time a little bit. So you'd see me sort of go bobble a little bit in front of the camera, and that was driving the focus guy crazy. So I still had a lot to learn just with the technical aspect, and and then there was also just goofy work stuff. Like at the end of the day, I'd take off my costume, and I assumed they were going to wash the costume completely. So I would just leave it in a pile after, and the costumer walks up and says, what are you doing? Just leaving your costume in a pile. You hang it up at the end of the day because people have to come in and take your stuff. And sometimes they have to steam out the stuff and steam out the wrinkles, and you're going to use it another day. And I was like, oh, you're not going to clean it?
Because in theater,
yeah, no, everything's
gonna,
because you're a sweaty mess at the end of the day. Everything gets, So there was all kinds of things that I had to, just basic actor stuff that I had to learn, and it was funny because I was working with Demi Moore, who had a lot more experience she had done some films, and she had done General Hospital for a long time, the soap opera, with John Stamos. He was like the first like star guy that I met in Los Angeles, and he was super nice actually. But he was just huge at the time on General Hospital, and I remember telling my friends back in New York, oh, I just hung out with John Stamos today.
And they were like, what?
What? Al Pacino's nothing compared to John Stamos. But to me, actually was a little, she thought that because I came out of the theater, I was kind of a classy person. And I was like, I assure you, nothing is further from the truth to me. Actually, here's a funny thing. I had her biography came out recently, her autobiography, and it's terrific if you have the time. She did obviously she went through some very rough things in her life, and she's very, very brave about a lot of what she talks about. But she at one point talks about No Small Affair briefly and says that she's very sad. She felt bad because we dated while we did the movie, and she felt bad because she took my virginity and she didn't feel like she had sort of understood the gravity of doing that. And I unfortunately had to because she was apologizing in this book, and I was like, well. And I said, you shouldn't feel bad because honestly, you weren't my first. And I can understand from my level of skill at the time how it may have seemed that this was my first swing at the ball there. But
it's funny that the publisher didn't ask her to call you.
No,
and say hey. Were you still a virgin at that point?
Yeah, and it's not like we were on like bad terms or anything, I don't know. Apparently, saying I was a virgin doesn't defame me in some way, I guess. Anyway, but No Small Affair was was my first sort of starring role, and I learned a lot in that, and I've never. Interestingly, it was one of the few sort of romantic movies that I was ever cast in, and I never felt comfortable with it. Never felt, on-screen intimacy is weird. It's super strange. There's a lot of people who are great at it and great at making it look like, oh, I believe that, but I'm not one of them. And I mean, like in 2.5 Men, we had a lot of sex jokes and stuff like that, but invariably it was about my awkwardness. So that was not difficult for me to.
So that was a better fit.
Yes.
For the screen.
Yes. And I actually seared into my memory is I used to when No Small Affair came out, I got a limo and went to a bunch of the theaters where it was playing because you just want to see, how are people enjoying it, and I was there. There is sort of a love scene at the end of it, and I take off my shirt at one point, and I took off my shirt, and in the theater somebody yelled, "Where's the beef?" Which was a catchphrase at the time from a very popular commercial, and that sort of seared in my mind that perhaps I should keep my shirt on. In the future. Although, interestingly, on 2.5 Men, they discovered that me being naked was hilarious. So they ended up working that note quite a bit in later iterations of the show.
Some might say adorable,
Yeah, sure. Some might say that. Sure.
Okay. So, Pretty in Pink?
Pretty in Pink, yes. Something that nobody ever asked me about.
I know. Well, I do want to ask you about working with Annie Potts.
With Annie Potts, who was lovely. Annie, the Howie Deutsch first, before he had me sort of hang out with Molly and Andrew, he had me hang out with Annie Potts because we were supposed to be sort of the same tribe, and he wanted us to have a real comfortable vibe. And she had done this incredible. Her career was really taking off, and she had a terrible car accident that had destroyed both of her legs. She had to her legs had to be completely rebuilt. And,
oh my God!
She was in a car accident. I think that was after. Was it Corvette Summer? Was her first big? It was a movie with Mark Hamill.
Yeah. That would be Corvette Summer.
It was probably Corvette Summer. And everybody said, this woman is a star to watch. And then she had this awful accident. By the way, Mark Hamill had an awful accident right after Star Wars. People needed to drive better in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they just needed to be more careful. This is why we now have safety belts.
Yeah.
But at any rate, so that really put her career on the sideline for a while she recovered for that. And but she was always one of those people who everybody was like, oh my God, this woman has an incredible charisma on screen, and you just love her from the moment you see her. So she and I immediately hit it off. She was lovely and fun, and made me feel really comfortable. But by contrast, when I started rehearsing with Molly and Andrew, it was awkward. It was very, Molly is not a super gregarious person, and I'm from New York. As you can see, I'm a very gregarious person. And so people that are super quiet, immediately I overcompensate. And Andrew was the same way. So I thought, they're teaming up against me. They're both kind of remote people. What I did not know was that Molly just keeps to herself, which is fine. And part of the reason she's wonderful as an actress is because she doesn't just give you everything. She keeps some to herself, and you can just tell on screen. Andrew, however, I I didn't know that he was going through a lot of rough psychological stuff at the time. He was having his first burst of fame, and it was kind of alienating him from some people in his family. He was dealing with it with alcohol already at 20 years old or whatever, 21 years old. So he was going through his own stuff, and I just totally projected it on, I was like, oh, they just don't like me. Which, of course, later came to be that he didn't like me. Eventually, I was able to turn him against me. But Molly and I actually never, we were fine, but I just assumed because she was remote that there was some problem there.
It's the challenge, I think, of being a young person in an industry that is all about liking something so desperately. And I think it's hard not to walk into that situation and immediately be going, do they like me? Do they not like me? How am I doing?
And I was from the theater where it's all a family and you're all working toward the same thing every night and you all gather and it becomes this big fun group of people. A movie's totally different. You come, you shoot on the days that you're there, and the rest of the time, you can be in a movie with somebody who you never meet because, they didn't come to the rap party or whatever. But it's a very different situation. It's much more businesslike, much less of, we're a family now and we're going on the road like a circus. It's
whereas I think
like
sitcoms may be a little more theater-like.
Yes.
You have to kind of get along with everybody.
Yes, exactly.
Eventually, it will not work out because you're working that closely all day.
Exactly. You build a family. You see each other every week. You come to depend on them. You understand their timing. You understand what they're great at. You understand what the things are. How you can help them. And it's when they work well, it's a great situation. But it's much more like theater in that respect.
So that's very. Did you ever work with Annie Potts again?
She did an episode of 2.5 Men.
Oh, she did. Okay.
One of the great things about doing 2.5 Men for 12 years is sooner or later everybody's on it.
Yeah. John Stamos.
Absolutely. See, it all comes around. It all comes around.
I will admit to being one of the few people at the time that did not see Pretty in Pink. As people who listen to the podcast know, I was notoriously anti-teenager.
Oh, interesting.
And just didn't find their stories about teenagers featuring teenagers to be particularly interesting for the most part.
The 80s must have been tough for you because it was like all teen movies.
Well, no, I liked all the grown-up movies.
Okay.
It's not like I watched American Gigolo, but I was more interested in what the grown-ups were up to. But I watched it recently, and I have to say it was great.
Oh, thank you.
It really was great. I was very, very pleasantly surprised to find that it was something that I actually liked, and I probably would have liked if I had seen it back when it first opened. So, and of course, you were great as were Andrew and Molly and everybody else. So,
well, yeah, it's a prom movie, and so it's got that sort of quintessential teen thing, Plus, interestingly, it dealt with class, which was not a super common thing in the 80s. We kind of wanted to ignore that was happening. It was very aspirational. It was like, the pretty rich girl is the one I want to date, and it's like, but it's funny because it was about class, and it was the original script. The friendship between Duckie and Andy, Molly Ringwald's character, was really the prime thing.
It originally ended with you guys dancing.
Yes, the original ending of Pretty in Pink was Molly's character shows up at the dance. She's scared. Duckie shows up, saving the day. They go in together, and Andrew McCarthy apologizes, and she basically says, "Well, you should have been a better guy," and that's the end of it. And then she and I dance together to the school to David Bowie's Heroes, as a matter of fact. And then we shot that, but when they first showed it, the test audience, which had been loving the movie up until that moment, suddenly started booing, and that's not what you want. But it was interesting because that meant that what the script was saying had to change a bit. Because originally it was about this sort of, hey, F the rich kids, what's the,
if they're not going to behave,
if they're not going to, but instead the message became, you can still have the cross class romance, the cross class romance can work, which is a different thing. I personally was fine with the first one, but
was I the last person on earth to because honestly I didn't know how it ended because again it just wasn't on my radar. I was getting to the end fully expecting her and Duckie to get together. I was very surprised that didn't happen, and I was like, I don't know how I feel about this.
Well, it's interesting because people, people have it's sort of been twisted pop culturally into Duckie and Andy were supposed to be romantically in love at the end. And that's not really what the script is. I might be misrepresenting it when I say that. They were just dancing together in sort of an FML, in solidarity. In solidarity. It wasn't necessarily saying that they were going to be romantically involved. But it's been interpreted by, everybody's like, Duckie she should have been with Duckie at the end, so the script was never really that. But let's face it, Andrew McCarthy is a dreamboat. He's a very sensitive guy. He's a sensitive rich kid. And thus worthy.
And he feels bad.
And he feels bad about it. So it's okay.
It goes to that. The romance movie is really hard. And even though this was a movie about class and it has so many other things, I think that's one of the reasons it holds up so interesting because she's very interesting and she's trying to stuff with her dad. All that stuff is a little bit out of the norm of a teenage romance.
Yes.
And so when it comes down to it, we still want to ship everyone, right? And I think in some ways the shipping was what an audience was going, yeah, but I need it to just come on.
It's true. It's really true. It is, you wanted, there were times of their vulnerability. I think that's what it was for when because I had to watch the movie fairly recently. Actually, Annie and I were doing a benefit, and they forced us to watch the movie.
Forced you?
and it was really fun actually because obviously times have changed and there's social mores that are like, oh, is Duckie stalking her? Stuff like that. But the vulnerability between Molly Ringwald and Andrew McCarthy is such that you do want that to be honored in some way. It's so powerful. And I can see that's what audiences were going for. Also, if you recall, the 80s was, it's fun to be rich,
Yeah. Greed is good.
There was this absolutely unashamed pursuit of it, where, it wasn't, it doesn't mean you're necessarily bad, and I think, John Hughes was becoming very wealthy, so maybe he was like, "Hey,
maybe
I'm still a good
so
person. maybe rich people aren't so bad." Yeah.
How does it feel to go back and watch those old movies that you're in from that you haven't seen for a long time, or maybe I don't know if you watch all the things that you do or
not.
Yes,
I just basically sit in my basement most days. I make myself some sort of alcoholic drink or just straight alcohol, and I sit in my basement in a threadbare robe. My dogs come in and I shoo them away, and I just watch my old movies on repeat for hours and hours at a time. Every now and then I am forced to reassess them. I recently rewatched Hiding Out because they wanted me to do an interview for it. And that was fascinating. Hiding Out was a movie about, I was a stockbroker who gets in trouble with the mob. And so he has to hide out by pretending to be a high school student again. And that was the fun of it, was adult in high school, who's been through all this other stuff and should know better than this. And, and it's, there's like a very chaste, but, romance between him and a high school senior. That's not cool. That is not okay. That is troublesome. To say the least, and there's some racial politics that are a little uncomfortable as well. It is fascinating though, because the 70s and the 80s were an interesting time culturally. The 70s, you see all these amazing movies like Bad News Bears, and with just what was the Paul Newman hockey movie that was so amazing?
Slapshot.
Slapshot. Thank you.
Oh, so great.
Just incredible vulgarity and homophobia and racism.
Yes.
Holy shit! If you watch Bad News Bears, you're supposed to really love the kids who are super duper racist. And I was trying to think. I was like, why did we feel like that was okay? And I feel like in the 70s, because the Civil Rights Act had happened in 1965, the 70s was like, we're past that, right? Mm-hmm. It's all cool now, and I think that was the why people felt like that was, okay to see. Also, it was because they were trying to portray reality in movies, like Bad News Bears is actually kind of verite if you watch how it's shot.
Yeah, it's really, and it is like kids are all,
and these kids are big personalities, and one kid is a flippin' hoodlum, and everybody's so fucking good in that movie.
Walter Matthau is driving the kids around drinking out of his glove box. Like,
exactly.
He's got he's totally drunk the entire movie.
The entire movie. And he's in charge of children.
Yeah.
But it is a wonderful snapshot of America in the 70s.
Yeah. Because it actually, again, my dad was taking us to bars when we were in the 70s.
Holy crap. So I have enjoyed looking back at my movies for that kind of stuff. I hate watching myself perform. There's very few times that I have enjoyed myself. Like I really loved Hot Shots. That's a movie I can watch over and over. This goofy, comedy. Sheen is in it and he's wonderful. And Lloyd Bridges.
It's very. We were watching clips from it, and we were like, we got to watch this again.
Yeah, it's fun. It's a really fun movie. Like that's one I can watch. But most of them, I just cringe. I have a little, I don't love myself as an actor. And, there's always things I feel like, I could have done that better. So I try to sort of stay away. But interestingly, like on 2.5 Men, I used to watch them every week. Mostly just for sort of quality control, because I was trying to see if I was starting to get hacky, if I was trying to rely on the same stuff week after week, because you're in an ongoing enterprise. Every week you get to do another one. So it was a way to sort of keep on top of is my character getting too broad, Well,
and you did it for so long.
Yeah, I did it for 12 years.
I imagine you could be like, am I just. It's like doing, I don't know. Well, no, I mean, it's.
There's 260 episodes. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a lot.
That's a lot. So every week of being Alan.
And then you directed some.
Yes.
And then how was that directing?
That was fun. It was a little overwhelming because it's a lot of moving parts. Directing a multicam is, it's 4 cameras at once, especially if you're in the thing.
Yeah.
What you end up doing when you're in the thing is you have a thing called a tech coordinator who is usually there's somebody who's directed as well. And they will make sure the cameras are in the right places while you perform.
Yeah.
So it's like there's 2 directors almost at that point. But for me, it was great. I had by the time I was directing 2.5 Men, obviously the cast was just really cohesive and fun and And the crew was incredibly cohesive already. And one thing I discovered as a director that was wonderful was that everybody on the crew really does want to help and can, from the prop guy to the camera guys to the, to the set designers to, everybody wants to find a way to feel like they helped with the show. So like Brian, one of the camera guys, came up with my 2 favorite shots in the thing. It wasn't me being a genius. It was him saying, "Hey, John, I could do this." And I was like, "Yeah, do that, Brian. That's an amazing shot." But you have to be open and say, "Hey, if anybody has any ideas about this, let me know, because I'd love to figure this out." To be able to admit, "Hey, I don't know how we're going to do this. Does anybody have an idea?" And people will chime in. It's amazing.
That is so cool. So some of the directors, you worked with Penelope Spheris.
Yes, on a movie called Dudes. Yes.
With Dan
Roebuck,
who I know. I know Dan
awesome.
Roebuck. He's
so lovely.
He's so lovely.
Yes.
He's so lovely.
Yes. And that was a fun movie, but a very difficult shoot. Penelope Spheris went on to direct Wayne's World, and she became a hugely popular director. But this was in her tiny budget phase. Yeah. And we shot in Arizona and immediately got hit with horrible weather issues, and we lost sets, and so we were behind the 8 ball for the entire shoot, and it was very hard that way. So the movie is it's a cult favorite. Let's call it a cult favorite. But we had, she had to do a lot of trying to fix things in editing because we lost entire sets for weeks, she really had to call on all of her skills as a director to piece it together. But it was Penelope Spheris also did the Decline of Western Civilization movies, which are a bunch of documentaries about punk rock and heavy metal and the music scene in LA. So she was very much a part of that. And because of that, the movie was very much a part of that. So, and we were playing punk rockers. So we did scenes with the Vandals, the band at the time. And because Flea was in it, Anthony Kiedis would come by. And so we had our Red Hot Chili Peppers representatives.
So it was hardcore and super cool.
Yes. It was.
You were hanging out with.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, the being a part of that music scene was my favorite part of that particular movie. And Dan and I, it was funny because Dan and I were like musical theater geeks.
Yeah.
So we did not come from that group at all. The first time that Dan and I had just been in River's Edge, which was this kind of breakthrough movie where he played this evil, hulking killer. And he and I, but in person, he's like the most jovial, hilarious guy. And so he and I we had to do this one scene where we're watching the Vandals perform, punk band, and we have to be in the mosh pit. And Dan and I are completely innocent of the mosh pit.
Yes.
We have no experience in that whatsoever. And Penelope, to her credit, said, "Nobody's going to believe a bunch of actors in a mosh pit. I got to get a bunch of punks in a mosh pit and then just throw my actors into the middle of that." And so she did that. She threw us and Robert Richardson, who was the DP of the movie, who went on to win Academy Awards for Platoon, and but he's a revered cinematographer. But they threw the 3 of us into the mosh pit, and first take, all 3 of us, including the cameraman, got the kicked out of us. And we were looking at each other like, people do this as a hobby. People do this for fun. But interestingly, after we did the first a couple of takes, there's a certain when they know you can stick it out, it acquires a different. They're not trying to surprise you anymore.
Yeah.
You
earned their
yes,
respect.
you've earned their respect to some degree. So that was an eye opener. That's what I'll call that.
Okay, I want to give you a little break if you need it, because we've been talking for a while, but I really have a couple more questions about the 90s and 2000s.
Okay.
And Teddy Z, the 80s.
Oh,
and
sure.
all that stuff.
That's the tail end of the 80s.
The tail end, but
Famous
you got in there.
Yes, under the wire. But yes, give me a moment.
Okay,
I'll
yes.
have a little water. Yes.
All right.
Obviously, you cannot just talk to Jon Cryer for a short time when he's willing to talk to you for a long time. So be patient. Our next episode will be part 2, and there we'll cover everything you ever wanted to know about 2.5 Men and Lex Luthor. So be patient. It's coming.
I don't know if it's everything you want to know, Sharon, about 2.5 Men, but it's some interesting tidbits that I didn't know. I'm excited.
As always, we hope 80s TV Ladies brings you joy and laughter and lots of fabulous new and old shows to watch, all of which will bring us closer to being amazing ladies of the 21st century.